that's Alien 4. Hello, friends. Welcome to day 7 of our experiment. Right, Pi? Okay, friends. So, last week we asked ourselves, which natural resource do seeds need in order to germinate? Then we set up a fair test where we gave seeds either soil, sunlight, water, or air to see if any of those resources would make our seeds germinate. I recorded my observations from day 1 of the experiment, which was last Tuesday for me, and you can see that I have labeled my kidney beans and sun, my kidney beans and soil, my kidney beans and a wet paper towel, and last but not least, my kidney beans and a bag filled with air. I'm not going to share what I recorded for day 3 of the experiment yet because I don't want to give away the surprise, so I am going to check out all 4 bags with Pi right now so we can see if any of our resources made the seeds germinate. So without further ado, Pi, why don't we grab the bag that is right here, our beans with sun, and we can look at that closely and see if there's any observable difference in our beans. Do they look like they've germinated to you, Pi? It does not look like they've germinated, unfortunately. They are still small. They are still hard the same way that they were before, and they are still the same color. So there has been no observable change in those beans. So we're going to record those observations after checking the other 3 bags. So next, we got our bag filled with air out of my sock drawer, and we're going to see if any of those beans germinated. So let's look very carefully. Can you see? What do you think, Pi? Did any of those germinate? No, they look exactly like they did on the first day, and they look very similar to the ones that are in the bag with sun. So it looks like air also cannot make beans germinate. All right, so now we have our sock. Okay, Pi, do you think you can help me get the other 2 resources out of my sock? Can we do this? Teamwork makes the dream work. Oh my goodness, this might be impossible. Pi, we can do it. Oh, I feel it. I feel it. Let's take out one of those bags. I wonder which one it is. There we go. It's our bag with soil. So let's search for those kidney beans in our bag filled with soil. And actually, I can feel them too. So remember, observations means all 5 of your senses, not just your sense of sight. So you also want to be using your sense of touch, your sense of smell to make your observations. But it looks like that bean looks exactly the same, doesn't it, Pi? And it feels exactly the same too. So that one did not germinate. So hopefully, what's our last resource? Oh, right, water was our last resource. So let's see if the water made the seed germinate. Let's see, Pi, if you hold the top. Let me see. Of course, I had to choose the longest sock that I had. I don't know if that was the best idea in hindsight. It's fun, though. Okay, let's get it out. And let's look at our beans with water. Whoa. Okay, so the first thing that I'm noticing is the smell. Pi, do you notice the smell? It actually doesn't smell bad. It smells kind of like a plant, actually. It doesn't smell like mold. Doesn't make you go like this. It smells, I would say, fresh. And it smells similar to a plant. Can we say that, Pi? Okay, wonderful. So that's definitely something that we'll write down when it's time to record our observations. And now, let's slowly take these out. But you can already see, look at that little root that's right there. There's a small root coming out of the top, so let's open this. Oh, thank you, Pi. Great job. And let's see what happens to our beans that were given just the right amount of water. Oh, wow. Okay, so Pi, I'm going to need you to go run an errands for me while I look at these. So I need 2 hands. So look, friends. This is really exciting. You can see that all 3 beans now have, not just 1 root. They have a lot of roots coming out of them, and look, they've even started to grow a little stem. And if I feel them, they're actually a little bit warmer to the touch than the other beans. That's interesting. And they're soft. You can see that the seed coat on the outside has started to crack. And you can see, let me see if I can get one of these. Ooh, wow, and those roots are really good at gripping to the paper towel. I'm sure that same adaptation really helps them root down and not get uprooted when they're trying to survive out in nature. But let's see if carefully, without damaging, I can show you one of these up close. Oh, there we go. So you can see that we have this big root that's down here. We call that the primary roots. And then all of these roots coming out from the primary root, we call those the secondary roots. So not only did the bean grow primary roots, but secondary roots as well. And you can see that the seed coat has broken, and you can see a small little leaf right here, actually. So I think definitely all of these 3 beans have germinated. So now what we're going to do is we are going to record all of our observations to prepare us for writing our conclusions. So I will see you very soon for that. Okay, friends, so I just finished collecting my data. That means what I observed. We know that detailed data leads to detailed evidence. So this step is super important because the more that you think to write down for your data, the more thorough your evidence will be, and that will help the reader understand how you know your claim is true. So I already showed you what I wrote for my data for day 1. For day 4, for the sunlight, soil, and air, all I wrote was that there was no observable change in beans, and I also added some detail about the texture and the color. I noted that they were still small, they were still hard, they were still brown, and they were still slightly cool to the touch. So those are just some details that you could add. I didn't mention that there was no odor. You could also write down that there was no odor. But on day 4, for water, I noticed that the seed coat had started to crack on just 2 of my seeds, and a small root had started to come out that was a translucent white color. So I drew a picture of my 3 little beans. I wrote that 2 out of the 3 beans have a small white root, and actually at first I just wrote root, and then I said, Miss Cat, we need more adjectives to describe those roots. So I added small, white, you could even add translucent. Oh, and that's what I wrote. I wrote that the roots are translucent. So there are, of course, even more details that I'm sure you can think of on your own, which I'm super excited to read. So without further ado, here is day 7 of my observations. Again, for the 3 resources that had no observable change, I wrote that there was no observable change, and then I took some time to draw this specific germinated bean, and I drew every single detail. Do you see how it looks exactly like the one that's in front of it, except it's flipped this way? Nope. I was right the first time. That way. There we go. You did a decent job, Miss Scott. And then I labeled that the seed coat had cracked. I labeled that the cotyledon was showing. I labeled the stem that came out. I labeled the primary root that came out. I labeled the secondary roots that came out. And I made a couple additional notes. I wrote that all 3 seeds had germinated. I wrote that it was slightly softer to the touch. And as I mentioned before, there was that nice fresh plant-like smell. So I also noted that it smells fresh. So recording all of your data is super important because now it is time to write our conclusions, and we will refer to our data chart while we are completing the first part of our conclusion. So I will be right back to help you with the conclusion part. Okay, now it's time to write our conclusions. So if you haven't already finished collecting all of your data, please pause the video and go do that thoroughly right now. Then, if you are ready to write your conclusion, you should be prepared with your data chart. You should be prepared with all the sentence starters that I gave you in Google Classroom, and you should also be prepared with all of your glossary terms because that will help you when you're writing your reasoning. So, first, we need to make our claim. That means we are directly answering the question. So I will show you my claim. I simply wrote that in conclusion, kidney beans, and I was specific because I used kidney beans, so you can be specific about whichever seeds you used, but I wrote kidney beans need water in order to germinate. So that is just one example of a claim you could write. Now I need to describe the FAIR test in detail and describe which materials I used, what I did first, second, last, and then I will go into more detail about how I made this a fair test that will allow the reader to set up the exact same fair test and see if they got the results. That will also allow the reader to hold us accountable and make sure that we are doing good, honest science. So, if you finish that, then you'll be ready for part 2 of your evidence. For part 2 of your evidence, you should get out your data chart, and you should go through your data chart, and you should write what happened on day 1, on day 4, and then on day 7, using all of those sentence starters. So remember, you're referring to all of your detailed data because that will help you write detailed evidence. And that's something that we've been working on in one of our writing goals that we've had in science during distance learning. You are also making sure that you're continuing to use descriptive language, which was our writing focus last week. That is going to make it more engaging and clear for the reader what you are describing. So if the root came out, maybe instead of using the word came, you want to use a word like slowly cracked out. You want to add details like the seed coat cracked. Think of which colorful adjectives and verbs you can use to really paint the picture for the reader so they understand exactly what you observed during your fair test. So friends, right now you should go pause this video and you should make sure that you have finished your claim and your evidence, and then our focus for the rest of the angiosperm unit is going to be improving our reasoning and understanding the point of reasoning. So please come back here when you are ready to write your reasoning. Okay friends, so what is reasoning anyway? Reasoning in CER is where you make a logical connection between your claim and your evidence. So I'm going to walk you through this using the sentence starters that I have in Google Classroom. I have the sentence starter. Based on the evidence, we must conclude that. And this is where I am going to reword the claim I'm trying to prove. One way to potentially say that is seeds require water, but not soil, sunlight, or air to germinate. So again, that was just where I reworded my claim. I'm going to now make a connection using the word because in order to connect that back to the evidence that I observed. So I wrote because the seeds that were given water were the only seeds that germinated. So do you see how I just summarized my claim and then summarized my evidence, but I made that connection and said, this is true because this happened. That's what your reasoning is. So that is our goal for this week, is to really hone in on how to make that logical connection between our claim and evidence for our reasoning. And then if you would like to go a step further, you can use the sentence starter, this seems logical because. And then you can think more deeply about why specifically seeds would only need water in order to germinate. And you already know enough about seed anatomy in order to make those logical connections. So you should think, what energy source is the seed using in order to germinate? Are they doing photosynthesis? No, right? Because they don't have any leaves, so they can't do photosynthesis. So as a result, they would not need sunlight or air because they don't need to perform photosynthesis. And then soil is actually a bonus for plants. Plants don't need soil to survive at all, and that is called hydroponics, which we will get into later next week. So then we are left just with water. And then the seed is able to use water and the energy from its cotyledon in order to grow the roots and shoots that it needs to get its first leaf, so then it can start doing photosynthesis. So that is what you are adding to the end of your conclusion. If you want to go above and beyond, thinking deeply about why that seems logical, and then if you want to take it a step even further, you can make some connections using my sentence starters on my connections page, thinking about how would this be related to engineering, or how would this be relevant maybe to a certain field of biology. Please make as many connections as you can. Do not hesitate to contact me with any questions. Enjoy writing your conclusions, and I will see you soon for another experiment. Bye.